Hey, do you have to comply with the CSRD? In this episode, I'm going to interview Maarten de Haan, who's a sustainability expert at the Kraft Heinz Group. So if you were ever interested in how the big companies are approaching the CSRD and the related regulations, then this interview is going to be super interesting to you. Enjoy. First of all, thank you very much, Maarten, for taking the time. I really appreciate you taking the time to be part of the AtlasZero podcast. You are the sustainability manager at the Heinz Kraft Group. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, how did you get into the position and what are you doing exactly right now?
Yeah, sure. I started about a year ago with Kraft Heinz in the sustainability team or sustainable procurement team, to be precise.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, my role was centered around EUDR compliance and also our wider deforestation commitment to implement that in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And over the year, it has slowly grown into an environmental role or nature role, where basically I'm also covering biodiversity, water, waste, pollution, sustainable agriculture. So it's become quite a diverse portfolio.
Okay. And how came that you personally decided to take up this topic?
Yeah, for me, I think my sustainability journey started about 5 years ago. Um, so I became more and more interested in the topic. Due to the facts, kind of what I'm seeing in the world, and I believe it's one of the most important challenges we have as a people to ensure that we can continue living on this beautiful planet for a while longer.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I kind of shifted my career from consulting and IT towards sustainability. First
Mm-hmm.
in voluntary roles in the previous organization, and also as a city councilman for the city where I live. And now it has grown into kind of a full-time role, and it's all I do.
Okay, super interesting. So before you became the sustainability manager at Heinz Kraft, you were in a city council doing sustainability related topics as well?
Yeah, so I'm a city councillor. It's a part-time thing. It's not a full-time job, so it's mostly at
Hmm.
night and the weekends, and if I find a
Hmm.
little time during the day. Um, so that's I'm kind of the sustainability lead for my political party, and we're in the coalition in the city where I live with other parties.
Hmm.
Um, and then in my previous job, I helped out with putting like solar panels at the production sites, to reach out to production sites and kind of help them with the whole process of getting renewable energy for those sites. And then I was contacted by Kraft Heinz about this position in sustainability, and I jumped on it because it's the most fun thing to do.
Yeah, super cool. I don't think you need to introduce Kraft Heinz because most people will probably know, but maybe can you give us a short dive into the sustainability world of Kraft Heinz? Like, what are the topics, sustainability related, that you're working on right now? Where is the company developing to, and what are the sustainability topics current to you right now?
So I think at Kraft Heinz, it's a very interesting place to be, because when I started, and still, sustainability uh, was kind of a new topic. Of course, we were already doing some sustainability initiatives, but I would say it was less mature than some of the well-known competitors like Danone or Unilever,
Mm-hmm.
that were already a bit more advanced. But this also created a lot of opportunity to kind of go into a green field setting, and yeah, you can define a lot of kind of the ways of working or how things should be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now where we're moving to, I think there are basically two challenges. One is compliance, right? It's not, if you look at EUDR, CSRD, and all those legislations coming out, it's not kind of a nice to have anymore. It's becoming a serious exercise, and
Mm-hmm.
also what you disclose, you cannot do cherry picking anymore. It needs to be the same kind of across the board. So that's definitely changing. And secondly, I think it's expected also by customers. So I think it's where maybe in the past it was seen as kind of a premium. I think now more and more customers are expecting it to be sustainable, and they don't want to pay extra. They just say like, everybody's doing it, so why are you not doing it? So I think that's also where things are heading.
Okay. Yeah, super interesting. I would also like to know, in a big company like Kraft Heinz, how many people are working in the sustainability team? Can you even like define that, or working with the sustainability topic?
Yeah, so we've recently gone through a reorganization, so it's a little bit harder, but um, at kind of the global level where I'm active at, there's a team of about 6 people that
Mm-hmm.
work on different topics. So I'm environmentally focused, then you have the social of the ESG, you have a packaging, you have a net zero lead. So those are, and then you have an overall lead.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the different topics, what we call material topics that are
Mm-hmm.
being led. And then geographically, the world is basically put in different zones.
Mm-hmm.
And then each zone also has a head of sustainability who's responsible for the implementation. So the global team kind of sets the standards, sets the policies, sets the KPIs, and then it's up to the zones to actually implement those in the business with the suppliers and everything.
Okay. And you mentioned the compliance already. Did the Heinz Kraft Group did already some sustainability reportings in the past, or is the CSRD now the first real sustainability report in that sort?
No, we've already for several years published a sustainability report. Um, but like all companies, we picked our own topics on what to report on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's kind of like we, for example, chose palm oil
Mm-hmm.
as a topic um, to say that all our oil is RSPO,
Mm-hmm.
um, and with the message that it's deforestation free.
Yeah.
But you could kind of question like, what about the other commodities that are now part of EUDR? What is our deforestation policy on that one? And is mass balance RSPO really deforestation free? So I think that's an example of where before the scope was limited, it was one commodity, and now you see that's evolving and it's becoming kind of across the board, multiple commodities. Also, we've now not only committed, obviously, to EUDR because it's regulation, but we've also set a global deforestation commitment. So yeah, you see how quickly this sector is maturing from where we were just a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Very good. Do you have any other sustainability related goals next to the deforestation goal that you just mentioned?
Um, yeah. We have, for example, a sustainability commitment on sustainable tomatoes. So by the end of next year, all the tomatoes that go into our Kraft Heinz ketchup has to be sustainable, and their sustainable is defined as having FSA Silver, and FSA stands for Farmer Sustainability Assessment of the SAI platform. And
Hmm.
yeah, we're using that external benchmark because it's an industry standard. So then I think that's perceived as more reliable than if you would have your own standard, where
Hmm.
yeah, people could ask like, okay, what does that mean, and is that like externally audited, and things like that. And because it's an external benchmark, also externally audited, we believe that's yeah, a more yeah, credible way of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely makes a lot of sense. You already mentioned the CSRD, and I would like to dive into that a little bit more specific, and especially about the process about finding a CSRD solution. So, when you're looking for a solution, and whether this is consulting or software that can help you with the CSRD reporting, are there specific criteria where you're like, the solution that we are looking for must have those criterias, or maybe there should criterias, or how exactly can you like create any type of criteria to then select a solution based on that?
Um, well, we're approaching CSRD from two ends. I think the first one is that we're about to conclude a double materiality assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will also help us to understand kind of which topics are material, how
Mm-hmm.
large is our CSRD challenge, because that will also drive the the complexity of the tool that we need to support it, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
if you only need to report on one topic or two topics, you could argue like, oh, I can do it in Excel. But it looks like it will be much more than that for us. So Excel, I don't think that will be the answer. Um, so yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we're looking. We started kind of looking into tooling initially from an EUDR perspective. Um, but
Mm-hmm.
we also included now requirements on CSRD, again, because we believe that there are a lot of overlap between the regulations in that regard. Um, so yeah, we're now down to kind of 5 solutions that we're going to run demos. And then, yeah, we've defined business requirements in terms of what do we want from that tool in terms of EUDR and CSRD. And yeah, both regulations are, of course, in development. So that also makes it a little bit harder to clearly define what's expected. The other week, I read something about like some form of tagging of data in
Mm-hmm.
that's expected, but then there were kind of people saying no, that won't happen until 28. So uh, yeah, we're really looking, I think, towards our solution providers to yeah, to understand what's coming, and even if they don't fully understand it today, we want the tool to be kind of ready and be able to grow with the growing requirements that are coming at us,
Yeah.
so that we don't buy something that's relevant today but also relevant tomorrow.
Yeah. No, makes sense. And you already mentioned that you have now different demo versions that you're looking at. Can you explain a little bit, how did you get there? Like, how did you approach the process of finding a solution?
Yeah, yeah. So we contracted Ernst and Young.
Hmm.
So they supported us with the requirements gathering. going to the different organizational like procurement, logistics, food safety and quality, and basically gathered the different requirements. Also, we wanted Ernst & Young obviously to provide insights into the regulations and what's expected on our end, and therefore what we should expect from the tooling. In the initial scope, we also included FISMA. So that's the food regulation in the US. So it's not sustainability regulation, but it has to do with food safety. But there's also traceability, a link to that. So that was kind of a third component that we recently dropped, and we said, no, we'll pick that up later. But we do believe a lot of similar. From a system perspective, the requirements look a lot alike. So that's how we approach it. So first requirements gathering, understanding the regulations, and then Ernst & Young came with a set of I think 12 suppliers that were a potential match, and then we send out an RFP to those 12, and now we've, based on the responses and the scoring, we've reduced it to 5. And with those 5, we've invited for demos. And then out of those 5, we'll pick the winner.
Very interesting. Now I'm curious to know what would you consider to be the biggest challenge in the selection process that you maybe encountered so far, or that you're still encountering?
Well, I think like I mentioned, the fact that it's a new regulation, that that there isn't a clear standard for this. So everybody says they can do it, and they all approach it from different angles. And so, everybody's kind of looking around in the dark and looking at each other like, what is the other guy doing? But we don't have the luxury to wait and see kind of what everybody else is doing, and then we'll follow. So I think that's the biggest challenge by far, that it's not a selection process like, oh, you have SAP and Oracle, they've been around for years, and we'll go with this one. It's really new, and also again, the regulation is still in development, so some things are still unknown. So you, how do you then make a selection and ensure that you're ready in time when the final regulations will only be known, very close to the time that you actually need to get started with it.
Yeah, understand. And now you have like the 5 demo sessions with the different solutions. Once you take a decision, who will be involved internally in the decision process? Do you have like a clear like structure, like who can make a decision, or are you already involving the different parties that will then be affected by a CSRD reporting? How do you decide who gets a say in the solution that you select?
Yeah, so we've basically, or I've been driving this thing kind of from the get-go, but I quickly found out that indeed there are many different stakeholders in the organization that need to understand what's going on, and will require kind of what comes out of the tool. So there's obviously procurement. You need to work with suppliers to get data in the tool on the traceability. I need to work with the audit department, because at some point Ernst & Young will look at the tool for numbers, and we have somebody responsible for reporting. So that's another important stakeholder. Legal needs to be involved because it's a regulation. It's I'm having this conversation frequently in the organization, and they also ask like, so you are the owner? And I'm like, No, not really. Like I'm one of the stakeholders, but and it's the same as saying who owns SAP in the organization. Nobody does, because it's finance, it's logistics, it's everybody needs that tool and the functionality. So it's really ERP across the board, and the same with traceability. That the organization is also struggling a little bit to understand, like, should this be owned by manufacturing or food safety and quality? It's kind of floating around, and a lot of interesting conversations on where it needs to land.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can imagine that this is quite complex to like bring all the different parts together and then like make a decision that is like the right one for every stakeholder.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but super interesting to hear. Mm, if you now had the chance to talk to yourself before you started with the CSRD journey, what are some of the learnings or something where you maybe expected it to be a little bit different, maybe expected it to be easier or more difficult? Like, what is a recommendation that you would give to yourself before starting with the CSRD?
Well, CSRD is still very recent, but and kind of the most concrete um, things I've done with it are kind of the double materiality assessment. I would say
Mm-hmm.
kind of how that's been conducted,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also a process where, of course, this is new for everybody, but the way it's been done, is is quite interesting. Also supported by a big accounting firm. Um, but I would say I would recommend, like, it's important that you really read up on it, um, go in well prepared, um, and it should be kind of an objective exercise backed by data and science.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you're not careful, it can become a subjective exercise on what the guy in the room thinks the impact is, yes or not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, that and in the end, it sets the baseline for everything else, right? For the reporting, for the tool, and all that. So I would recommend, go in well prepared, to set the right baseline, and in the end that can ensure that everything else that happens after is also done correctly.
Okay. Yes, sounds very interesting. I'm talking to a lot of companies that are still like very early in the process and that have to like, for them, it feels like they're standing in front of a jungle that is like still growing and moving, and they're just trying to like figure out what to do and then how to do it. So yeah, I'm always looking for different recommendations and tips to give to them because yeah, it's just difficult to like start the process and actually accelerate in this environment where things are not fixed yet and are still moving. Is there anything that I might have forgotten to ask or where you consider that it's important to mention when talking about CSRD and sustainability reporting in general, especially for those companies that are standing in front of the jungle? Or do you think that we covered the most important topics so far?
No, I think, like, we covered the most important things. So it's indeed kind of, everybody's at the beginning of that journey, and make sure that you understand what's important in your industry, what the impact is of your industry. Um, I think what would be, for example, interesting is, at some point, if, um, even though maybe the size of Kraft Heinz compared to Unilever is
Mm-hmm.
different, and some of the commodities that we buy are also slightly different, I think, like, a blueprint for fast moving consumer goods
Mm-hmm.
should be quite similar. So yeah, it would be interesting if if at some point Unilever completes their DMA and we complete our DMA, and imagine that very different things come out of that, right? That would be quite an eye opener. So, yeah, having kind of blueprints for that, similar to like if you work in automotive or you work in computers, I would expect a couple of blueprints being set up that you don't go in with a blank sheet into the room and say, "What do you think?" But you basically go in and say, "This is like kind of what a typical FMG company would look like, and how's yours different?" So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah,
I think that's a very interesting thought. I would also imagine that the measures for fast-moving consumer good companies in general are more or less the same. Of course, they vary a little bit, but
yeah,
in general, the measures to become more sustainable should be similar. And then also the tagging that you already mentioned with the XBRL from the EU, if
yeah,
they actually implement that and roll that out, and you can then compare those different numbers like exactly with the same points, I think this would be super interesting to then see, okay, how do similar companies differ in those measures, who's above average, who's below average,
yeah,
what can be
yeah,
improved, how did you get the data. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this once the first reports are out, to then actually work on the improvement, and not only on the reporting side. But yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, perfect. Those were all the questions that I had for you. Again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, you're welcome.